This is the Polygon Collosus N7, and this is the Transition Spire Alloy GX. And just like our last comparison video, we will be trying to answer the following question. Does spending double the money mean double the fun or double the capability? Well, to find out, I'll compare the frame and components on both bikes and then hit the trails for some back-to-back testing on one of my favorite enduro trails to see how they compare in the real world. But before we get started, drop a comment below letting me know the next comparison video you'd like to see us make. Both of today's bikes come with a robust alloy frame, perfect for the kind of abuse you'd expect to throw at an enduro bike. And they're both spec'd with 29-inch wheels front and back, and relatively similar geometry. If anything, the Collosus's steeper head tube angle and shorter chainstays will make it a bit more lively and agile, whereas the Transition leans a bit more towards all-out speed and stability. That said, the independent floating suspension, or IFS design, on the Polygon makes for an impressively plush yet supportive feel that more than compensates for the playful geometry when things get chunky. This design does, however, add some weight, and my N7 tips the scale at 40 pounds 5 ounces, almost 3 pounds heavier than the Spire. But don't think this added weight makes it a slouch, because it still had all the pace needed for Polygon Pro rider Dan Wolf to take home the victory at the legendary Trans-Madeira Enduro race last month. Now let's talk about some of the components. The $5,299 Transition Spire comes spec'd with really reliable parts such as a SRAM GX drivetrain, RockShox Lyric Ultimate Fork and Super Deluxe Ultimate Shock, and SRAM Code RSC brakes. Again, nothing wrong with any of those, but for the price tag, I might expect to see a little higher end components, maybe even a carbon fiber frame. The Collosus N7, on the other hand, is less than half of the Spire's retail price, but comes with an equally strong and reliable set of components, albeit with a bit less adjustment and heavier weight. It features a Shimano DR drivetrain, which has regularly been praised as one of the best value choices on the market. And our test trail today has plenty of punchy little climbs where we'll be able to test its reputation. Like the Transition, the Polygon relies on a RockShox Zeb fork and Super Deluxe shock, but goes with a slightly lower tier to help bring the price down. These products feature the exact same externals and air spring, meaning they're just as strong, but with a simpler damper that lacks some of the fine-tuned adjustment you'd find on the RockShox Ultimate level suspension. It'll be interesting to see if I notice these differences on the trail. It's the same story on the brakes as well, with the Collosus getting a more affordable option that can provide comparable performance to the Spire. The N7 uses Tektro M735 brakes, which have a 4-piston caliper up front, a 2-piston caliper in the rear, and huge 203mm rotors both front and rear. The Spire, on the other hand, has SRAM's 4-piston Code RSC brakes, which are a very popular selection for enduro bikes. Brakes are a critical component in a gravity setting, so I'll be sure to put both sets to the test and give you the results. A final area these bikes differ is in their wheels and tires. The Stan's S1 wheel set and Schwabe tires found on the Transition do help reduce weight, and this is probably the biggest edge that the Spire has over the Collosus. But that, as with everything we've been talking about so far, doesn't matter unless we notice the difference in rotational weight on the trail. So without further ado, let's get these two bikes loaded, get on the trails, and get ripping. All right, dropping in. So fun. Oh, every time I get on this bike, I'm instantly reminded of how fun the IFS suspension really is. You gotta remember, it has the same frame as its higher ranking. Woohoo! That's fun. I had to pause. The higher end T9 shares the same frame, just different components to make it a little more, budget friendly. Woo! Sick. You don't even feel the weight when you're going down, you know? Like, that's a good enduro bike for you. A little fun rock roll, heck yeah. Feels agile. When you get up to speed, get going, get in a rhythm, you really don't notice anything being, lower tier or anything. I would say the only caveat to that is that the brakes don't quite have the power I want for this bike. They do the trick. I don't feel sketch, but I do feel like a stronger brake would make a big difference. And I'm sure I'll notice the good brakes that come stocked on the Spire. So that'll be interesting to compare back to back. Despite the dust, the trail is still flowing pretty good. These tires and wheels feel good. I haven't felt sketchy even in the dust. Not losing grip. Woo! And still fast enough to pick back up after braking. So a few questions I'm gonna be asking myself as I'm about to drop in here that, without cheating, you should pause the video and answer what you think is, how does the geometry compare? Do I notice the weight difference? Do I notice, you know, any of the suspension setup differences? So pause the video before and find out. Yay! Interesting, okay. I mean, I right away can feel differences. So hopefully you pause the video and you're answering those things before this part. Woo! Oh! Yes. All right, so it's still allowing me to pop off some of those things. I was wondering if it wouldn't be quite as playful. Like, I definitely have to work a little harder to get it off some of those little poppy sections. Just wanting to stay grounded. Ooh, but I feel good grip around these corners. Woo! Heck yeah. Like that section, I definitely had about the same speed, but got a lot more air on the N7. But around these corners, I'm feeling a lot more secure. Yeah! Even if I'm getting sketchy. Yeah! Fun. Oh yeah, it's handling really nice over those technical features. Let's do our little rock roll. Oh yeah, it's eating up those techie parts. Brakes do feel better. These are a little nicer, for sure. Feel more secure. I think that's part of the confidence in going a little faster through some of the berms. I am noticing the weight difference. I wonder if you all thought I would, but not hugely so. Again, I do feel like the geometry is kind of, it's also like your preference as a rider. So I am more of a playful rider. I like popping up side hips and hits and things like that and finding the little features more so than just like how fast can I go, but can't go too wrong just getting that speed and feeling really secure. So that's a wrap on the test rides, and you can see by the dustiness of these bikes, they were well ridden and well tested today. And again, it was a pretty interesting comparison and finding out what was similar, what felt different on the ride. Now, first of all, getting back on the Collosus N7, it's always such a fun bike. I really do love the IFS suspension. Like, you can feel that playfulness with it. It's super energetic. It's, you know, you're popping off stuff. And I actually haven't got to be on this bike since last season, so it felt good to be back on it. And then comparing it to the Transition Spire, you know, really these bikes, they did feel pretty different. And I think that it's gonna come down to some preference. Obviously, price is a big factor that you wanna consider as well, you know, and that's the question we've been posing. Is it worth a couple grand more just for, you know, a little bit more stability? And this bike really did the trick with that. Brakes were better. I think with the N7, that would be one of the very first things that I would upgrade, is getting a set of really nice brakes. I'd feel a lot more confident and stable. I think I could rip a little faster through the berms once I felt that confidence through the brakes, which that, you know, that goes a long way. And just like we talked about when we compared the Specialized Stump Jumper to the Polygon T9, with the amount of money that you save between these two bikes, you could really take a bike like the N7 and make all the really specific upgrades you personally would want. Another great option to consider that is still significantly less than going for a bike like the Transition Spire is upgrading to the Collosus N9, which actually has the same frame as the Collosus N7, but has a higher spec component. So you get an upgrade in those brakes, which I've mentioned a couple times, and on the N9, you get an upgrade to the Fox Performance Elite suspension, which is actually the same tier suspension that you find on the RockShox Ultimate here on the Transition Spire. The Collosus N9 also comes with an XT drivetrain, which is my personal favorite when it comes to drivetrains, and it actually is a higher tier than what you find with the GX on the Transition Spire. So thanks for tuning in for this comparison. Remember to drop a comment below with what comparison you want us to cover next. While you're down there, make sure to like and subscribe to BikesOnline channel, where I'll be hanging out. And after you've done that, get out there, get on your bike, and get ripping.